Hey everybody, unfortunately we had some flooding in the basement. Let me show you the fixes that I made to the exterior and the cleanup process inside. Okay, the first thing that I did is I added a downspout to our gutter on this side of the house. There never was a downspout here, even though there really should have been. Right around in the middle of the roof line, the gutter angles toward the front of the house here, and it never had an outlet. So it was just overpouring the gutters, making its way into this window well and alongside the foundation here. I used some old roof shingle to, make sure any little drippage gets back onto the sidewalk here. And there was so much water coming through here that it had bowed out this brick window well. I took all that down and restacked it.
And I actually had to jack up the sidewalk a little bit to get the pitch a little bit more so it would see daylight at the backyard.
I cleaned this all out and I put a bunch of silicone around the trim and then also some rubber foundation covering along the foundation there. Alright, so I cut out all the carpet and bundled it up, and I'm going to take that to the dump. Honey's keeping watch. Down in the basement, I shop vac, ripped the carpet out, and started the process of dehumidifying. Next, I played a real-life game of Tetris in order to get at the baseboard and rip up the last remnants of carpet. Soggy carpet. Alright, you can see some evidence of water flowing in on the concrete there. I got this mini janitorial floor fan, and I'm really glad that I did. I'm just going to run this to help dry out the wall and the floor. We haven't decided what to do about replacing the carpet, but we know it's not going to be wall-to-wall carpet. And in that case, I'll rip up the carpet tack strip. And I'm using this floor pry bar to get it up. And I really appreciate the advertising that they put on here because the sticker says, also great for ice scraping. Because I probably wouldn't have purchased it if ripping up the carpet was the only thing I could use it for. And I'm glad that I got it because it made this process a lot faster. To be clear, heavy rain saturated the soil around the foundation, which then made its way through the gap between the foundation footer and the foundation wall. That's my theory anyway. The area of carpet that you're seeing here was the least affected, but it was still wet. And the more time that goes by, the more nasty it is. Handling this carpet is really yucky. It's starting to smell, and so I'm glad to have this part of the project almost done. Okay, to test if my theory is right, I really have to open up the wall to see if it's leaking from where the foundation meets the foundation wall. Maybe it's coming from a leak in the wall itself. Maybe it's coming from around the window trim. Who knows? I started by scoring a line and then hammering it out. I'm removing a 12-inch section of drywall. That's way too messy. So I use this oscillating multi-tool to make a more surgical removal of the drywall. I also need to remove the styrofoam insulation from the bottom of the wall. Okay, the dark discoloration on the wall and on the floor are indications of moisture. Dampness to the touch and lack of paint where the wall meets the floor are good indications that my theory is correct. So I'm going to remove the rest of the foam along the entire span of this wall and work on patching. And actually there are several spots along this 10-foot section of wall where there are clear indications that water has leaked through. After drying out this cavity, I mix up a batch of hydraulic cement. Moisten down that joint, and you can actually see where the water is percolating out. And then I'll mortar up that joint with the hydraulic cement. And then on top of that, more of that rubber sealant. Now, if water does want to enter, it'll come in downstream in the unfinished part of the basement that has a clear slope toward the basement drain. During the lockdown phase of 2020, I got the bright idea of repainting my walls with an old can of paint and a bunch of stiff and dusty brushes. So what you're seeing here is me returning the walls to their original color. I don't love this color, it's got a little green in it, but it'll bring the whole basement back to the status quo, and I'm okay with that. Here's a look at it, freshly painted. I'll put another coat on and touch up some spots. And here I'm just checking out the moisture level of the drywall. In the basement, we're somewhere between 3.0 and 3.5, which is still in an acceptable range. Upstairs is around 2.5, so I think we're good. The most daunting part of this project is by far the floor. The floor is rough. It is sloping. And we have a number of important criteria that a new floor needs to fulfill. It needs to be pet friendly. So wall-to-wall carpet is out. A new floor needs to be waterproof. Or at least it needs to be replaceable enough to deal with some kind of minor flood in the future, like, say, carpet tiles. We also use the basement as a sometimes guest room, and we use it for exercise. So it has to be both warm and resilient. The most obvious solution is some kind of porcelain or ceramic tile, but that requires the most level and flat of floors. Some kind of vinyl or other kind of plank system that floats on top of the concrete seems to be ideal, but also requires a relatively flat floor. A self-leveling concrete product seems to be pretty tricky. So I've resigned myself to be patient and to focus on grinding down the high spots and making what is a rough floor relatively smooth and uniform, and at least friendly to a leveling compound. So what do we got going on here? I've got a 4.5-inch angle grinder from Harbor Freight with a 4.5-inch diamond grinding blade, also from Harbor Freight. The angle grinder is connected to a shroud. The shroud has a dust collection port which is connected to a dust cyclone, and that cyclone is connected to a shop vac with a paper filter and a HEPA filter. I have a 3M respirator, eye protection, and hearing protection, and knee pads. I've got the box fan aiming out the window with everything taped off, and that's evacuating the dust that's airborne. This hallway taped off, and you can see that it's ballooning to kind of let me know that even though it's not like a perfect seal, that the majority of air is just being sucked into this area and then evacuated out the window. I'm using this 2x4 that I've ripped down with my table saw to get a straight edge, and using that to see where there are gaps in the floor. I'll also use that as a screed when I pour self-leveling compound. So yes, grinding has become my life, I am making progress, but in order to see what happens with this floor, you're gonna have to come back for part 2. Hey, here's a sneak peek of what you're gonna see in part 2. I'd really appreciate it if you subscribed, and we'll see you on the next one.